Welcome. Close your eyes and imagine yourself in 1600s Japan. Silence. The faint sounds of bamboo in the wind are out of place. The moon cuts the sky like a sword, and you are a samurai. Today is not about an ordinary soldier, but the emergence of a warrior who lives with honor and does not fear death. You greet the morning with sword training. Your every step is measured, you do everything carefully. Because a single mistake could mean the end for both you and your clan. You are bound to a daimyo. Loyalty is not a choice for you, it is a constant, and this devotion is sometimes more valuable than life itself. But tonight, there is no war. Your mind is full of the annual burden, even as your sword rests in its corner. Perhaps you are sparing an enemy. Perhaps you are honoring an old friend you must cut down. Being a samurai is not just about fighting, it is about being prepared to die while living. Tonight, we will take you to the unseen demonstrations of the samurai. To the sleepless nights, the unspoken pains within, the sacrifices made for duty. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, comment, and support us with the join button. Now take a deep breath and set out for the silence of a samurai in Japan of distant years ago. Childhood with sword training. A child's spirit was broken before he grew up. Waking before sunrise is the first duty of a child born into a samurai lineage. While your eyes are still opening, you begin to train not your body, but your mind. Yawning is forbidden. Drowsiness is a flaw. You cannot yet lift the weight of the wooden sword you will inherit from your father, but a part of your memory has already begun to bear that load. If you were born during the Edo period, into a samurai family, your childhood essentially never began. There is no play. Crying is weakness. Even joy must be restrained. Every morning, you must walk barefoot on the stones lined up in the garden. Even if your feet bleed, you remain silent. Because this is the first step of discipline. You are only 8 years old, but you are expected to have the patience of an adult. Your first sword is a wooden bakken. You are still too young for a real katana, but you carry it like a sacred trust. Your trainer is often your father's friend or another samurai. He does not shout. He just watches. He wants you to understand your mistakes through his gaze. Your fall, your misplaced strike, is a lesson, the wound is a teacher. At certain times of the year, you are taken to temples. You learn by kneeling. You learn to think, to empty yourself, to silence the mind. Because one day, in a real battle, you will face not the enemy, but your own fear. And if you cannot conquer your fear, the sword in your hand is meaningless. Therefore, even as a child, you must win your own battle first. Even meals are training. Eating slowly, giving thanks, staying silent. Talking at the table is disgraceful. Even knowing what you are eating is a luxury. Because you are working not for pleasure, but for duty. What matters is not the satiety of the meal, but the duty that enters your bloodstream. Every morsel that enters your body fuels a greater burden. Playing with other children is almost forbidden. If a child provokes you, you do not respond. But with your trainer's permission, you can teach him a lesson with the sword. This is not violence, it is discipline. Because you are a soldier. You became a warrior before you even grew up. Even if your mother loves you, she does not hug you anymore. Because it is known that this child might not return from his path. Therefore, it is a silent love. She places her hand on your hair but does not hold you. When seeing you off, she looks into your eyes but does not coddle you. Because she, too, has been molded. Being a samurai's mother means waiting patiently in silence. As you grow, you begin to see battles in your dreams at night. Not just in war, but lifelong. On the road, when enemies suddenly appear, your hand goes to your sword, but you cannot draw it. These nightmares start in childhood. Because the perfection expected of you follows you even in your sleep. By the age of 12, you are no longer considered a child. Training continues not only in the mornings but also at night. You learn the movement of the moon. Walking without making a sound, passing the test without crushing a leaf. These are the first tests of a samurai child, and a single mistake could be the disgrace not of a day, but of a lineage. Combat is not just about the sword. Archery, writing, poetry, and even tea ceremonies are all forms of training. Because a samurai is not just one who kills, but also one who thinks, feels, and measures. Therefore, as a child, you are given ink. Writing with a brush is a more delicate task than striking with a sword. Your hand must not tremble. Because if the brush trembles, so does the sword. But perhaps the most difficult training is silence. Not asking questions, not complaining, knowing when to be silent. That is why samurai children do not speak much. Because silence is a discipline as sharp as a sword, and you learn this before you learn to understand. One day, when the training is over, you finally receive your real sword. Not wood, but steel, sharp, cold as death, and heavy. Something you must hold not with your hand, but with your heart. You are no longer a child. But at that moment, you understand better that you never lived your childhood. Because a samurai's childhood is a life that never really began. Silence punishes emotions. A samurai contains everything but shows nothing. A samurai walking through the bamboo forests on Japan's misty mornings is silent. Silence is his essence. Because for a samurai, emotion is not something to be expressed, but to be swallowed. Anger does not explode, sorrow is not shown. Even joy is quietly suppressed. For one who carries a sword must first master his own veins. Punishment for emotion is not meted out with slaps or shouts. In the samurai world, punishment is silence. If you make a small mistake, the master only looks at you but says nothing. This is the most painful punishment. Not being spoken to, being ignored, and having to record it within yourself. If you cried as a child, your voice was suppressed. You are taught to be ashamed of your own tears. Because in samuraihood, suffering is not valued, but enduring suffering is. However, this does not apply only to boys. Female samurai also receive the same discipline. Emotions are considered a weakness on the battlefield, and this weakness risks not only you but your entire clan. When you lose someone, you clean your sword instead of tears. You do not show mourning, but you carve a nameless mark on a stone. Perhaps you leave a small flower, then continue on your way without stopping. Because stopping, dwelling on the past, is recorded on the enemy's ground. Honor demands moving forward. Falling in love is the greatest test. For a samurai, love is like a secret that should never be spoken. Showing your love softens your sharpness. A softened face is seen as weakness, and weakness means death. Therefore, watching from afar, sometimes being willing to die for them, but never saying, "I love you," is one of a samurai's inner conflicts. On the nights before battle, most samurai cannot sleep, but none say they are sleepless. Their bodies are tense. Their eyes are closed, but storms rage within. They must turn inward. Because a samurai is also human, and humans fear waiting for death. But even this fear is not spoken. To speak of fear is to amplify it. Therefore, everyone remains alone with their own being. Some samurai impose this silence upon themselves as punishment. They speak to no one for months. They only work, fight, and think. This is their way of facing themselves. Because much happens in the outer world, but even more revolves within the inner world, and a samurai must first win his own internal war. Even a samurai who is betrayed does not shout. He just turns, stops, and does what must be done. Because shouting means opening your heart to the enemy. The greatest betrayal of emotion is to show it to the enemy. Thus, the strongest samurai is the one whose face remains calm while a storm rages inside. Even tea ceremonies for samurai are a ritual to prevent the expression of emotion. Your hands must be steady when holding the cup. Your eyes must not wander when sipping. Your words must be balanced when speaking. Every movement is a technique for ignoring the inner emotion. That is why samurai faces are often unreadable. They do not reveal what they feel or do not feel. They do not smile. They do not frown. But their hearts overflow. But no one sees this overflow. Sometimes, when you lean against a tree trunk alone, only the leaves hear the tears flowing within you. And in the end, when the sword is drawn for the last time, there is again silence for that samurai. Not even death brings him emotion. Because he learned it as a child. Feeling is not a crime, but showing feeling is unforgivable for a samurai. Loyalty to the daimyo. A single mistake means death. Loyalty is not an order, it is a form of death. A samurai does not only fight, he also obeys. But this is not blind obedience. It is the surrender of a soul, the dedication of a life. In Japan's feudal structure, every samurai is bound to a daimyo. A landowner, a protector, and also a ruler. His word is not just law. It is beyond that. It is fate. If the person to whom you are duty-bound is determined from the moment you open your eyes, then personal decisions are no longer yours. Because you are no longer an individual, you are an order. You advance with a glance, you retreat with a silence. Loyalty is the heaviest word locally. Because it is not enough to just serve. The essential thing is to be willing to die for your lord's problem without expecting anything in return. This is the samurai's sharpest rule. The daimyo's enemy is your enemy. Whether he is right or wrong is not debatable. You do not question the consequences of an order given. Even if the mistake is his, the shame is yours. And for this reason, samurai sometimes embark on paths leading to death. Because the main issue is not living, but maintaining the purity of loyalty. Loyalty is tested not only in war but also in peace. For many samurai, the most difficult period was not war. Because then orders decrease, expectations become abstract, and doubt arises from within the loyalty. It is in these silent periods that remaining faithful to the daimyo reveals the true samurai's science. When you make a mistake, it is not your incompetence. It is diminishing the daimyo. A small disrespect can erase years of service in a single night. In such abundance, most samurai offer their apology not with words, but with seppuku. This is a silent farewell form where the samurai cuts into his own shame and reaffirms his loyalty to life. A samurai serving a daimyo can never stain his name. Because even if the samurai dies, his name lives on. The family that boasts of this name, the enemies that fear it, the servants that whisper it. If that name gets a stain, not only you, but everyone left in your family, your lineage, goes with it. In some examples, the daimyo makes wrong decisions. He starts a war he cannot win. Some samurai grow and persist despite these orders. They know this path will end in death. But what they leave behind is not life, but a trace. A line drawn with loyalty. Because in Japanese history, some deaths speak louder than lives. Samurai make small gestures to show their devotion. Swords bearing the daimyo's name, armor embroidered with symbols, oaths of loyalty containing the clan crest. But beneath all these external divisions lies an internal philosophy. I do not exist. He exists. Loyalty is a state of mind for the samurai. Unquestioning trust, unconditional surrender, unrewarded sacrifice. In the modern world, this thought might seem expansive, but for the samurai, it is a way of existence, and sometimes even a single breath is accounted for to the daimyo. One day, if your daimyo dies, then the greatest test begins. Some follow him to his grave. Some take on another duty to keep his memory alive. But the heaviest oath is this: I served him while he lived. Now, even in death, I will protect his honor. Bushido. Living by the code of honor. It is not written in some programs. It is carved into bones. For a samurai, this is not just a list of rules. It is like breathing. It is invisible. But he begins to do things with it, and he bites with it. In Japan's centuries-old silence, the step the samurai takes, the gaze he carries, every head he bows to, is a reflection of this visible law. Bushido means the way of the warrior. But this path is drawn not with blood, but with honor. For one who carries a sword, defeating the enemy is not enough. He must defeat himself. Because the most difficult victory is the one won against internal weaknesses. That is why Bushido is not just about war, but about life. The first step of this path begins with gi, righteousness. Learning what is right and choosing it in the situation. Not the easy thing, not the expected thing, but the right thing. This could sometimes be exposing a lie, sometimes reporting a betrayal, sometimes withdrawing from afar. Righteousness is the samurai's first mirror. Second comes you, courage. But this is not reckless madness. It is the ability to act despite the fear of death. The samurai walks despite his fear. Because courage is not fearlessness. It is being friends with fear. Courage is measured not when you draw the sword, but in the hesitation before drawing it. Jin, mercy, is the soft skin of the sword. The samurai is strong but not cruel. He can kill an enemy but never humiliate him. He does not scold a servant. He uses his strength not to destroy, but to protect. Mercy is the samurai's heart, as sharp as his sword. Rei, respect, is hidden in a bow. His bow, his speech, his gaze are signs of respect. Respect for oneself, for the enemy, for the elderly, for nature is a boundary that not even war can soil. A samurai delivers the final blow to his enemy with respect as well. Because honor is above victory. Makoto, honesty, is the honor of one's word. When you say you will do it, you do it. When you say you will come, you come. Because for a samurai, a word is as powerful as a written order. Lying, or even diminishing honesty, is a stain on honor. Meo, honor, is the quietest but heaviest principle. Once lost, it cannot be regained. Therefore, a samurai does not fear death, but fears dishonor. For a samurai, disgrace is a weight he carries with his strength but never cuts. If honor is stained, the body goes. Therefore, it is power. One gives up life to protect honor. And finally comes chugi, loyalty. The promises given to the daimyo, family, clan. Loyalty is like a rope. Invisible, but it holds everything together. Disloyalty is not just betrayal, it is a return to the void. The rules of Bushido are not written on paper. The samurai does not see them with his eyes but finds them in his relationships. That is why when he makes a mistake, he is not shouted at, he is not beaten, they look into his eyes, and he already knows. Because a samurai's conscience is sharper than any external judgment. Walking this path is not easy. Mistakes are not forgiven. Victories are not exaggerated. One day you are a hero, the next day you can be reviewed. But what matters is not the reflection in the exit, but the silence inside. If a samurai can sleep with his own conscience, he is true to Bushido. The world of time changed. Castles fell, empires toppled. But Bushido remained. Even today, the order on a Japanese businessman's desk, the angle of his bow, the measure in his speech, are all lines of this ancient path. And one day, a samurai's son does not even speak as he passes on his breath. He closes his eyes, places his hands on his knees. Because he knows a life lived with Bushido makes even death honorable. The inevitable son, seppuku, and silent suicide. When you look at Japan's long intervals, some deaths have been experienced. There is no scream, no pain, no fuss. One simply kneels, closes their eyes, a knife is drawn, and a person seals their own fate with their own hands. This is not suicide. This is a stop. It is a form of honor. This is seppuku. Seppuku, also known as harakiri in the West, but that term remains superficial. Its true meaning can only be reached in Japan's stone-silent past. Seppuku is a samurai opening his own heart, both literally and spiritually. Because a samurai cannot continue when his honor is tarnished, and the punishment cannot be obtained from another. He applies the punishment himself. Because no one can understand a samurai's honor like he can. Seppuku is a ritual. Everything happens within certain rules. First, a clean kimono is worn. It is black. It symbolizes purity, surrender, and purification. The setting is silent. There may be a few people around. Your closest friend or your master takes on the assistant role of the kaishikunin. He is the one who will behead you. Because in seppuku, the abdomen is opened, but to prevent prolonged suffering, the neck is severed immediately afterward. The samurai sits kneeling. A short knife, the tanto, lies in front of him. You do not do it to others. There is no fear on his face. Only a kind of acceptance. Because this is an end internalized over many long years. To die by one's own decision is more honorable than to live by another's cut, says Bushido. When he grips the knife, the entire burden of his life gathers in his hand at that moment. The first cut is made from right to left. Opening the abdomen, touching one's own body, is actually about revealing the soul. A samurai experiences not breakdown during this movement, but inner peace. Because he knows this end is a purification. Then the kaishikunin brings his sword down from behind. The neck is not completely severed. Because severing it completely is disrespectful. The head remains connected to the body by a strip of skin, and this is the sign of a proper seppuku. So when was seppuku performed? Most often after a mistake. Samurai who failed in their duty, who thought continuing would stain their master's honor. Sometimes to show loyalty after their lord's death. Sometimes as a form of silent protest in political games. But in every instance, this was to be a decision, not a death. Sometimes seppuku was accompanied by a letter. These final words, the samurai's jisei, expressed their life and regrets. But often these notes were short. Because a long explanation is a form of self-defense. Whereas a samurai does not defend himself. He only surrenders. Seppuku was not exclusive to men. The female version, known as jigai, also existed. Samurai women resorted to this path with the same surrender to avoid falling into enemy hands or to protect family honor. They were also silent, they were also brave. The modern world cannot understand this ritual. Because today, life is sanctified, death is feared and escaped from. But for the samurai, the struggle is not about living, but about how one lives and how one ends. Seppuku is not an act of desperation, but a display of will, and that is why, even centuries later, this act is remembered with respect. Today, no samurai remains, but some names are remembered not only for how they lived, but for how they died. Because a person sometimes leaves a mark not with their life, but with their farewell, and samurai are most themselves at that moment of farewell. When the fire goes out, the place is buried in silence. But one who looks at the blood on the ground sees not a death there, but a decision. And that decision was made not with a sword, but with honor. Farewell to the family. Those who leave their duty behind. A samurai walks. He leaves silence behind him. As Japan's winding mountain paths are washed by the first light of morning, a man walks with heavy steps. A katana in his hand, a pack on his back, and a silent heart within. He does not look back. Because for a samurai, the greatest test is farewell. But this farewell is not done with shouting, nor with crying. Just a glance, a bow, a freedom that seems like nothing but tells everything. A samurai loves his family. His wife, his children, his mother, his father, but he does not utter his love. Because Bushido gives brilliance to duty, not to emotions. When duty calls, the samurai does not stop. Because loyalty is not only to the daimyo, but devotion to the path, and this path sometimes tears you away from the one you love most. Marriage for a samurai is not peace, but responsibility. He is proud of his wife, but he is prepared to say goodbye every day. Because one morning, a summons may come, and he must leave without a trace. Because going on a mission often means not returning. Therefore, the partings of samurai are lived not with ceremonies, but with competence. A child cannot memorize his father's sadness. His gaze is brief, his touch restrained. But those children, as they grow, learn the path their father walked, and one day they walk the same path with the same silence. This cycle is passed down from generation to generation, not by blood, but by honor. Sometimes a mission lasts indefinitely. Samurai sent to distant lands by a daimyo's order cannot even receive news from their families by letter. Because a letter is weakness. The desire to return clouds the samurai's mind. Therefore, one must cut ties. To become one with the duty. To become nothing with the family is the most difficult, but the most sacred. Vows are lived not at home, but in the heart. When a samurai leaves his home, he only bows to his wife. The woman averts her eyes but places her hand on her heart. Because both know this is not a goodbye, but a sacrifice. The thing they have dedicated their lives to lies beyond being together. This is the samurai's solitude. A life that walks alone, is remembered in silence. Some samurai return to find nothing as they left it. Children have grown, spouses have aged, the home has fallen silent. Because war devours not only bodies, but time as well. And a returning samurai often finds that he has not truly returned. Because what remains is not just his family, but his former self. Samurai women live through similar solitude. They, too, are on duty. The duty of waiting, of prayer, of standing strong. There are those who live with an absence by their side every night. Every meal is eaten with one missing. But they do not break. Because being a samurai's wife requires the patience of a warrior. Some goodbyes are heavier. A samurai heading for seppuku leaves a letter for his family, but the letter is short. My path ended here. You continue with honor. and those left behind shed their tears inwardly. Because crying openly for a samurai would make him appear weak. Therefore, much solitude walks Japan's stone paths. That silence is the echo of those who have parted. Years later, a samurai's child finds his father's sword. The hilt is worn, but the blade shines. Because the duty is complete. Honor does not tire, and the child bows in salute to the father he never fully knew. In that bow, love, longing, respect, and legacy come together. Bidding farewell to family is harder for a samurai than death. But he carries his eternal family with him. In prayers, in the wind, in his sword. Perhaps he is physically absent, but his spirit is always together with them. Because even if a samurai leaves, he lives on through those he left behind. And sometimes, the greatest loyalty is knowing when to leave. Because sometimes, for the good of loved ones, one must avoid looking into their eyes, one must be neglected. A samurai walks. He leaves silence behind him. But that silence echoes even years later. Rain, watch, sword, and wind. The samurai does not sleep, he listens to the breath of the night. The air grows still before the rain begins. The sky darkens, but the storm has not yet arrived. For a samurai, this is the moment requiring the most attention. Because the enemy does not always come with a shout. Sometimes he is as silent as a falling leaf, sometimes as close as a breath. In a small castle built at the foot of a mountain in rural Japan, a samurai on watch understands the rain from the sense of weariness. The earth grows heavy. Bamboo branches curl inward. The air becomes humid. The hilt of the sword in his hand becomes slightly slippery. The rain hasn't started yet, but the preparation within has already begun. Watch duty is one of the quietest but most arduous tasks on the samurai's path. There is no battle, no sound, but the threat stands in the midst of it. Patience, stillness, observation before action. The samurai fights not only the enemy but also his own impatience. The wind picks up during the night. The face of the samurai standing watch in the tower is kneaded by the wind. His eyes narrow but do not close. His ears become accustomed to the sounds. Everything carried by the wind is distinguished separately. Because for a samurai, his own lack of focus can be as fatal as an unnoticed approaching enemy. The rain begins. The first drop falls on his shoulder. Then the second, and then the sky opens up. Now it becomes not a physical but a spiritual test. His clothes grow heavy, his breath mists, his hair sticks to his forehead. But his body does not move. Because the duty is not over, and a samurai does not flinch before his task is complete. Some nights are long, hours pass, but nothing happens. That's when the samurai's mind begins to wander. The question, "Is there really a threat today?" circulates in his mind. The answer is not important. Because samuraihood is bound to what must be and what must be done. Whether there is a threat or not, he will wait in the tower. Even if the rain swallows him, even if lightning strikes. Watch duty is solitude. But this solitude is not empty, it is a teacher. Because the samurai hears himself when he is alone. His inner voice, his weaknesses, past mistakes, and he learns to stand with all his burdens. That's why nights are important. They are the silent teachers of war. Sometimes you don't stand watch alone. You stand shoulder to shoulder with another samurai. But you do not speak. Speaking distracts attention. The bond between you is built not with words, but with standing. You hear each other's breath. You reach for your swords at the same time, and you continue waiting in the same silence. Memories come with the wind. The death of a friend, the eyes of a comrade heading to seppuku, the voice of the child he left at home. These memories are as sharp as the cold. But the samurai does not falter. Because his inner war is deeper than the external enemy. Towards morning, the rain subsides. The sky turns gray. A rooster crows in the distance. The duty is over, but the samurai does not immediately descend from his tower. He first checks his sword. He cleans his hands. Then, there is not a single trace of expression on his face. Because he has merely done his duty. He expects neither praise nor thanks. This is his path, his night. For a samurai, the greatest victory is reaching the dawn. He has not fought an enemy, nor spilled blood. But he has triumphed over physical impatience, fatigue, and despair. And that morning, he leaves no mark on the castle's stone courtyard. Because the mark of labor remains not on the feet, but on the soul. Killing the enemy with respect. The samurai kills, but never humiliates. A sword strike can sever not just a body, but a life, a past, an honor. And that is why a samurai does not swing his sword randomly. Because for him, killing is not a pleasure, it is a duty. But even that duty must be carried out with respect. In the old stories told in Japan's mountain villages, there is always the same scene. Two samurai face each other. The wind whips bamboo leaves. Birds fall silent. Breaths are drawn from the earth, and it all comes down to a single second. But within those seconds lies a lifetime of training, a silent understanding, and a deep period of respect. Samurai bow before fighting. This is not to greet the enemy, but to acknowledge the opponent's humanity. The one opposite is not merely a monster. He, too, has loved ones, memories, fears, dreams. And if you are to kill him, you must do so not with contempt, but with understanding. Because honor is not lost even in death. Many samurai, when challenged to a duel, do not refuse, but they never ask for a duel to humiliate. They call for a reckoning, not to provoke, to belittle, or to show off. And this reckoning is a moment when not only swords but also hearts are weighed. When the battle begins, the samurai draws his sword but does not shout or show off. He simply waits. He focuses on his opponent's move, his attention, his breath. His strike is a form of respect. Because it shows he takes him seriously. If he scorns his opponent, he diminishes his own honor as well. Sometimes the enemy falls, loses his weapon, and the samurai lowers his sword but does not kill. Because victory comes not only from killing, but also from the ability to forgive. Seeing the enemy's strength and accepting his defeat is enough. This is to leave the opponent not his life, but his honor. Yet, if combat is inevitable, the samurai kills quickly, without causing suffering. Because death is not a punishment. It is a consequence, and even that consequence must have a form, an elegance. That is why many samurai salute their opponent even at the moment of death. I am proud to have fought an honorable enemy. Some samurai write letters to the families of the brothers they have killed. Not an apology. A message of respect. Your son fought bravely. I killed him without tarnishing his honor. I wanted you to know this. These writings touched the hearts of those left behind by the enemy. Because respect is shown even after death. Acknowledging that the enemy was also a warrior elevates oneself. That is why samurai do not humiliate their enemies. They never boast over corpses. They do not announce their victory with shouts. The battlefield is eventually abandoned. Because not only losses but life itself has been lost there. Some samurai consider encountering a worthy opponent in their lifetime a blessing. Because a true battle gains meaning only with a valuable opponent, and thus, the presence of a strong enemy is considered a grace. Samurai children are taught from a young age, the person opposite you is not your enemy, but the mirror that makes you better. Therefore, to insult an opponent is actually to break your own reflection. In the end, when a samurai kills his opponent, he kneels, closes his eyes, and whispers to the passing soul, "Respect to you. May this death be honorable, and I am its witness." The inner peace found in temple silence. The samurai lays down his sword, but the sharpness of his spirit continues in the temple. A warrior's greatest victory is not in defeating an enemy, but in being able to silence his own inner turmoil. In a wooden temple nestled among Japan's noisy mountains, at night, there is only the sound of silence. This is a place where the clamor of sword ceases, where one kneels and breath finally finds its end. It is here that the samurai fights his true battle. The one within himself. In the temple, one does not speak. Because words are always inadequate. Teachings are received not with the eye, not with the ear, but with the heart. The priests wake before sunrise. Incense is lit, floors are swept. The samurai joins this routine. But here, there are no orders, no duties. It is enough to simply exist. Because at the end of Bushido lies not the sword, but spiritual balance. A samurai is as pure in the temple as he is sharp on the battlefield. Because here there is no opponent, no reward. Breaths are counted. Steps are taken carefully. Tea is drunk without spilling. Bowls do not clatter. Eyes do not wander. His purpose is to become one with the moment. And this is the quietest form of honor. Samurai do not pray in the temple in the usual sense. They clasp their hands briefly but do not ask favors from God. They only listen. Not to the noise of the outer world, but to the echoes of the chaos within them. Because the unheard voices find resonance here. Some samurai retreat to the temple after long missions. No one sends them. No one says it's enough. But they know, just as a sword must be sharpened the more it is used, so must the soul. And the place for this sharpening is silence. There is no writing on the temple walls. The ceilings are simple, the floors are stone. But within this simplicity lies a deep magnificence. Because temples grow not through ostentation, but through shaping. And it is here that the samurai confronts his past. The enemies he has killed, the words left unspoken, his pains, his prides, they all walk here. A candle burns during meditation. The samurai closes his eyes. His back is straight, his hands on his knees. Time flows, but he is fixed. Outside, it may rain, a storm may break, but in the inner world, there is only a pond. Still, without a ripple. This state is called Satori. Awakening. And this awakening comes not with the sword, but with silence. During the days spent in the temple, the samurai behaves not like a warrior, but like a student. He carries belongings, shares food, scrubs floors, leaves his pride behind. Because here, no one is superior. Everyone is in the same silence. On some days, walks are taken in the temple garden among the bamboos. The sound of branches swaying in the wind is more instructive than a sword strike. Because nature is a teacher here. It lives silently. Without haste, without show. In the temple, the samurai does not draw his sword, but he sharpens it in his mind every day. Because inner peace is not a preparation for war. It is making a life without war possible. And this understanding comes after the struggles of humanity. Because peace is the gift of maturity, not victory. Sleep in the temple is deep. Because there is no fear there. The accounts of the past, the anxieties of the future, all remain outside those stone walls. And when the samurai lies down, he breathes peacefully, for the first time in years, as he truly is. When the morning sun hits the temple courtyard, everything begins anew. But nothing is the same anymore. That samurai is not the same man. When he girds his sword again, he carries it not only to fight, but also not to fight. Because true power lies not in drawing the sword, but in not drawing it. Shadows and espionage. Sometimes the sharpest sword is a whisper. In the shadows of Japan's feudal structure, in the stone corridors of daimyo palaces, in the dim corners of inns, some people do not speak. They leave no trace when they walk. They make no sound when they speak. They read what is unseen by the eye. They are not samurai. But they carry things that can change a samurai's fate. They are the shinobi, or as commonly known, ninjas. Espionage is not an honorable form of warfare. Therefore, it is not openly glorified. But its necessity has always existed. Because the first winner in war is intelligence. And that is why a daimyo had to have a spy he could trust as much as a samurai. These spies work not in the light, but in silence. Their battlefield is not the field, but the shadows. A spy wakes up every day with a different face. Today he is a merchant. Tomorrow a monk. Another day a servant. But he is never himself. Because on this path, identity is a burden, not a benefit. When the mission begins, the past is forgotten. The spy is merely information. He carries no emotion. He asks no questions. He receives orders and observes. Shinobi is solitude. It begins with saying goodbye to family. Because not a single trace of the past is allowed to remain. Those left behind are in danger. Therefore, most spies use so many disguises that they forget their real part, and in the end, even their own kin see them as strangers. Espionage is not just stealing information. Gathering, diverting attention, glancing at a map, sometimes a single sentence stolen in the dead of night is the only thing that will determine the fate of a war. That is why a ninja never sleeps. Not because he doesn't sleep, but because he lives alert. The black clothes they wear are not designed just for invisibility. They are designed for anonymity. Disappearing into the shadows, walking with the wind, running tirelessly, these are not just techniques. They are a way of life. A ninja merges with the world in the silence he maintains, and that is why he goes unnoticed. Some spies bring information, others take it away. They spread lies and whispers, they plant them. They sow small doubts in the trusted men of rival daimyos. Not with words, but with gestures, with a glance. Because the enemy is sometimes shattered not by a sword, but by an idea. However, espionage is not easy. His every step is a danger, his every word can mean death. If caught, death is only the beginning. Because a captured shinobi must not speak. And here, freedom is sharper than any sword. Therefore, they often carry poison. To be able to disappear before being captured. Samurai die with honor. Shinobi disappear. Their names are not written in history books. But in the shadow of many great victories, their trace exists. A piece of information shown at the right time is sometimes more valuable than an army of 1,000 soldiers. Espionage training is not a school, but a way of life. It begins in childhood. Balance, silence, patience, face reading, lie detection, mimicry, memorization, all are taught. But the real training is given in the field. In real life. Because a mistake is made only once. What follows is silence. A spy can defeat an enemy without even fighting. Therefore, daimyos both love and fear them. Because trusting a shinobi is like releasing him. His loyalty, his happiness are never certain. But if he returns, he changes history. When you see a silhouette flickering in the streetlights at night, that is perhaps not an enemy, but certainly a stranger. And that stranger carries information. He comes silently, he leaves. But what he leaves behind is sometimes a war, sometimes a peace. And at the end of the day, he is buried in an unmarked grave on a hillside outside a village, without receiving any fee. No name is written on it. But on some nights, the wind blows differently over that grave. Because a country protected by silence rests on the shoulders of a warrior in the shadows. The betrayal of a brother, the treason of a clan. The deepest wound is opened by the sword from the closest side. Being a samurai is not just about being alone, it is about knowing how to walk together. A bond is forged between people who have undergone the same sword training, knelt in the same temple, bowed with the same loyalty to the same master. This bond is sealed not by blood, but by honor. And therefore, a samurai's brother is not just someone from his family. He is his closest friend, the comrade he fought alongside, the person to whom he entrusts his back. But it is precisely for this reason that betrayal burns the most when it comes from within, and this fire lasts much longer than an enemy's sword. Clans are not just military units, they are also a family system. The daimyo's most loyal men live not only for their duty, but also for each other. They celebrate victories together, they bury deaths together. If one falls, the others become answerable for that blood. And this very wholeness sometimes becomes as great a weakness as it is a strength. Because the one who will sever it emerges from the shadow within. At first, he is like everyone else. Respectful, loyal, silent. But over time, a hidden worm gnaws at his patience. He grows secretly jealous when duties are shared. His eyes narrow when praise goes to another, and eventually that person becomes an agent. If not of the enemy, then of his own interests. Betrayal never comes with an open blow. It approaches with silent steps. A small secret is whispered to the wrong person at the wrong time. A document disappears. An order is delayed, and finally, an enemy attack occurs precisely when the cell's information has been leaked. Then, not only blood flows, but also trust. The greatest trauma is betrayal by those closest to you. Because you have eaten under the same roof with that person. You have stood watch together in the same rain. You have stood back to back. Perhaps one night he even entrusted his sword to you. And now, that person has sold you out. The punishment for betrayal among samurai is severe. Immediate death is not always the answer. Sometimes they are sent into exile without question. Sometimes they are forced to commit seppuku. But the real punishment is being shunned. The clan acts as if that person no longer exists. His name is not mentioned, his grave is not dug. Even the past related to him is forgotten, and this means living death for samurai. Sometimes a samurai detects betrayal but does not reveal it. He watches silently. Because a false accusation is equally dishonorable, and justice is as important as loyalty. Therefore, he sometimes endures that inner ache until the truth emerges. The most painful thing is that sometimes the betrayer is the beloved person. Your brother, your friend, the man you grew up with. And when you see that he has sold you out, your heart is torn in two. One part still loves him, the other wants to defend his honor. This war is fought not externally, but internally, and the winning side sometimes lives with lifelong regret. Masters give one piece of advice to young samurai: learn to watch your brother, not your enemy. This seems like a harsh saying, but it is a truth forged by experience. Because loyalty is a samurai's greatest sword, but also his most easily broken armor. After a betrayal, those who remain are changed. Samurai become less trusting, they speak less. Even when leaning on each other, their eyes are always on the periphery. The clan's unity is preserved. But the foundation inside is cracked. Because once a link in a chain breaks, it is never the same again. Yet, some samurai forgive. Because they know that humans can make mistakes. But this forgiveness is given not with words, but with action. The betrayer sometimes wants to return. Then he is given one last chance, and this chance often comes with a mission he must pay for with his life. He either succeeds, or dies with honor. The betrayal of a clan is not just the death of one person. It opens a wound in the soul of the whole, and even if this wound eventually scabs over, its mark remains. Because samuraihood is not just a martial art. It is a journey built on trust, and the greatest loss for a traveler is losing his companion. A knight of harakiri. Writing honor with blood. A samurai is not always killed in battle. Sometimes he kneels silently and seals his own honor with his own hands. Night had fallen in a distant village in Japan. As the silver moon hung in the sky, it caressed the pine trees among the winds. In a wooden room overlooking a temple courtyard, a samurai knelt. There was no scream, no struggle. There was no crying tonight. Tonight, honor would be preserved. Seppuku is the act of a samurai carrying out his inevitable end with his own hands. It is not a surrender, but rather an ultimate form of resistance. It is washing away, with his own blood, the stains he would not allow to soil his honor in the hands of another. This act is performed to avoid disgrace, to complete a debt, to atone for betrayal, or to eternalize his devotion to his lord. The night of harakiri is different from the day. Time moves more slowly. Things are done with ritualistic care. White clothes are worn. Death is prepared for with dignity. Because this is not an execution, it is a ceremony. Next to the samurai is someone called the kaishakunin. He is also a samurai. His duty is to end the suffering by beheading the samurai in a single stroke after the seppuku is performed. This person is often the closest friend, and this is one of the heaviest burdens for a samurai, to witness the honor of a loved one and to kill to protect it. Before the ceremony begins, the samurai writes his final letter. This letter, addressed to his family, his master, his comrades, consists of a few lines. There is no anger, no fear. Only acceptance and serenity. Often the letter ends with, "Do not grieve for me." This is a natural part of the path. The room where seppuku is performed contains no unnecessary items. The floor is bare as always. In the center, only a small table, on it a bowl of water, a few flowers, and a small tanto, or short sword. The samurai sits on his knees in his white robes. His eyes are on the ground. He clasps his hands as if in prayer. Then he reaches for the tanto. A brief silence falls. In this silence, his life passes before his eyes. His childhood, his training, his first mission, his first blood, his first love perhaps, and his final decision. When the sword is pressed into his abdomen, it is not the body that trembles, but the soul. Because the pain is not merely physical. There, the entire price of a life is being paid. A deep breath is taken, and the blow is delivered, decisively. Because this is not done randomly. The knife is turned left, then right. During this, the kaishakunin watches with his eyes, and at the moment he is ready, he brings his sword down sharply, separating the samurai's consciousness from his body. But never completely. The head falls forward but is not completely severed. This is respect. When the ceremony ended, everyone bowed. There were no speeches, no praises. Only planned closures. Because this is not a death, but an act of honor. The samurai's body was dead. Wrapped in white cloth, it was buried in a plain, unmarked grave in the temple grounds. Because that person is no longer an individual. He has become honor itself. Seppuku is not merely suicide. It is often misunderstood in the Western world. Yet, it is not an escape from pain, but a reckoning. Samurai live by their decisions as much as by their swords, and sometimes debts that cannot be paid with words can only be paid with blood. This ritual sanctifies not only death, but also life. Because a samurai must live every moment of his life in such a way that he is not afraid to greet death when it comes. And that is why the night of Harakiri is actually a night of enlightenment. Because on that day, the samurai bids farewell not only to life, but also to himself. Female samurai, representatives of silent strength. Some wield their swords with shouts, some are found, but all act with the same determination. In the shadowy periods of feudal Japan, many male names stand out. Swords thundering on battlefields, daimyo decisions, castle defenses, all are remembered by name. But behind the stone castles in the silence of the bamboo forests, there were others who carried the sword with the same courage, the same discipline, the same honor. They carried both the tenderness of a woman or a mother and the toughness of a warrior. They were the Onabugeisha, the female samurai. Female samurai have been silenced greatly throughout history, but they could never be stopped. Especially in times of war, they were not just those who waited and prayed, but those who resisted, fought, and led. Because samuraihood is not just a burden one can bear, it is a path requiring heart. A female samurai's story does not usually begin in the kitchen. It begins with basic combat techniques taught by her father or master at a young age. The skills initially taught for self-defense evolve into a way of life. Because war exists not only on the front lines, but also within the home, in the castle, in societal gazes. Women learn to protect their honor with both the sword and patience. Onabugeisha often consist of a wife, a mother, a leader. But they do not compromise their identities even in these roles. One of the most famous is Tomo Guzan. In the 12th century, she defeated powerful male warriors on the battlefield, taking the lead herself and standing out on the battlefield. She is not a silent hero, but a warrior whose name is cried out. But not all female samurai took to the open fields. Many served in castle defenses. They defended castles while the men were at the front. They were masters of the bow. They fought with long spears called naginata, and when enemies saw them, they felt astonishment before respect. Because they encountered something unexpected. Graceful yet unyielding. Female samurai are not just physical but mental warriors. They advance a martial art that combines strategy, patience, inner peace, and honor. They do not shout when they fight. They do not humiliate the enemy, but they do not retreat. Because for them, retreat is merely a tactical deficiency. Some female samurai led the clan after their husbands' deaths. If there was no male heir, the honor of the house had to be protected. Therefore, daimyo sometimes feared a woman sitting at home the most. Because that woman carries the weight of both her lineage and her future on her shoulders. Society's scorn does not diminish their strength. On the contrary, it stores it up and makes it deeper. Female samurai may fall in battle, but they never died dishonorably. History's other pages may be written by men, but they are the ones who live the real stories. When the war ends, male samurai hang up their swords. Female samurai continue to carry the sword, the home, and the family. because their war never ends. And when the wind rustles through the bamboos at night, if a sword sound is heard, it does not necessarily come from a man. Perhaps a woman is still waiting, ready, behind the walls. Silent, determined, and strong. Female samurai whisper one of history's greatest lessons: strength is measured not by noise, but by stance. Feast and solitude. It is easy to laugh in crowds, but no one knows the shadow that falls on your face when you are alone. The music rising from within the night wakes the stone towel of the temple. Instruments from behind bamboo screens, the rhythm of dancing feet on the wooden floor. There is a feast in the castle tonight. After a great victory, a daimyo has expanded his lands. The enemy has been repelled. The clan stands with honor. Everyone is laughing. Plates are full, sake cups are emptied. Lanterns hang in the garden, children run. Even the sound of daggers mixes with the celebration. But at that very moment, in the corner of the hall, a samurai sits quietly, hands on his knees. The mark of his armor is still on his shoulder. His knees carry the weight of having been on horseback until morning. But the real burden is in the emptiness of his eyes. He is a warrior who cut down the enemy just a few hours ago. The warmth of the blood is still in his mind. One of his comrades did not return. But he did. And now, while people laugh here, he still hears the roar of the battle. It's as if his body is here, but his soul is stuck in a valley, next to a fallen comrade. Feasts are contradictory for samurai. Because they are organized to drown out the silence that follows war. But no one truly knows the inside of war. A child applauds his father without asking how many lives he took. Because victory is better than death. But the samurai's mind does not forget. A mark is left with every sword stroke. The samurai raises his cup but does not drink. He scans the colors of the eyes. Are the laughs real, or is this too a duty? While the daimyo receives praises, his eyes fix on a distance. An empty chair. The friend who should be sitting there is no more, and therefore even victory is half. When a woman approaches to offer him a drink, the samurai smiles, but not sincerely. Because he is used to fake smiles by now. He takes the cup but still does not drink. In everyone's eyes, he is a hero, but in his own eyes, he is merely a completed task. That's all. Being alone in a crowd is the samurai's sharpest edge. Because the sense of duty always keeps you upright, but it also separates you from connections. If you have no family, it's easier, but if you do, knowing the legacy you left them in the war stabs your heart like a sword. Sometimes a gaze catches him. A young samurai watches him with admiration. Perhaps he too wants to be the hero of such a feast one day. But he does not know. At the end of this process, there is not applause, but silence. Because in the end, the applause fades, but the memories do not fall silent. In the middle of the feast, someone performs a sword ceremony. People cheer, but real combat lacks such showy movements. It is silent, dirty, sudden, and often broken. When the show is over, the samurai closes one eye. It's as if the shadows of another war from the past pass before his eyes. When he opens it again, everyone at the table is laughing, but he cannot place himself in the change of laughter. As the night progresses, sake cups multiply, the music rises, and for a while, everyone gets drunk. But the samurai cannot get drunk. Nor does he. Because a samurai must always be alert. This is not just for fighting, but to prevent the soul from scattering. At some point, the feast bites, the lights go out, everyone retires to their rooms. Only the flickering light of the lanterns remains in the garden. The samurai walks. He sits by the small stone pool in the garden. He watches the water. His reflection looks back at him. But it is not himself he sees past mistakes. Perhaps someone he killed, perhaps someone he couldn't save. Silence falls. That night, while everyone sleeps, a samurai keeps watch. Because the war may be over, but the solitude within still speaks, and no feast can drown out that voice. Dreaming of the sword. Some battles are not only fought by day. At night, the swords also speak, but this time the enemy is within oneself. Night had fallen on the temple's stone tower. The lanterns were extinguished. Everyone was asleep. Only a samurai knelt in his room. His hands were on his knees. His eyes were closed. His breath was heavy but regular. A katana formation was at his bedside. It had not been drawn from its scabbard, but its presence filled him. That night, the samurai would show not his sword, but the power of his sword. Samuraihood is not just about fighting, it is a silent bond between the soul and the sword. His katana is not just a weapon, but a mirror reflecting the character of its bearer. And looking into this mirror is sometimes only possible while dreaming. That night, the samurai dreamed he was inside a forest. The gaps between the bamboo trees barely illuminated his path by the moon. Leaves rustled with the wind. Dry branches broke on the ground. He had no sword in his hand, but he felt it. It was there. He stopped for a moment. A shape emerged from the mist in front of him. It had no face, but the samurai immediately began to realize it was the spirit of his sword. He bowed silently. Because this encounter was not a greeting, but a confrontation. The spirit of the sword asked a question without speaking. Why don't you truly fight when you fight? The samurai could not answer. Because sometimes duties that come with orders were more complex than decisions given by the heart. Another scene opened. This time, he saw himself as a young samurai receiving a lesson in a temple. The tip of the honor, the katana, was not as he knew it. It had cracks, traces of rust. This was his sword, but it was also himself. Because a samurai's soul is imprinted on his sword over time. And now that sword bore the marks of wars and inner fractures. In the dream, the sword withdrew. He was wrapped back into the forest. But this time it was not dark. Nor was it bright. There was only serenity. The samurai knelt and bowed his head. This was not a repentance, but an acceptance. The spirit of his sword had aged with him, been wounded with him, and now, as the dream ended, it was forgiving him. He was there. He was sweating, but he was at ease. He looked at the katana at his bedside. His hand was gently placed on the scabbard. I spoke with you. It was the longest night, he said inwardly. For a samurai must make peace not only with his enemy, but also with his sword. The sword is not a tool, it narrates. And the spirit speaking in the dream is nothing other than his own conscience. Katana and heart. Lethal grace. Sharpness lies not only in steel, but in the heart. Carrying a katana is similar. When a samurai opens his eyes in the morning, before he looks at the sky, there is one thing. The katana. Perhaps the intensity in its scabbard. Perhaps preparations have been made for a morning of battle. But in any case, it is there. Silent, unnoticed by people, and powerful. The katana is not just a weapon. It is a samurai's identity. The package of his heart, the mirror of his plan, the trace of his past. It is a life forged by master hands, tempered for days, kneaded with steel, shaped with patience. Each of the 3 layers of steel carries a meaning. One hides anger, another hides resilience, and another hides love. And all these emotions unite in the curve of the katana. That is why samurai treat it as more than just an object. They look at it, they clean it, they salute it. Because they know that the katana can turn not only against the enemy, but also against its owner. Owning a katana is not about having power. The main issue is controlling that power. The katana may be sharp, but if the heart is numb, it is directionless. The cost of the hand may be unnecessary, but even the most correct price for the budget can be unjust. Therefore, samurai, in their sword drawing, fight not only with an enemy but also with their own souls. No matter how elegant the katana appears, it carries a storm within, and reigning in this storm is possible not only through training but through heart discipline. Because it reflects the state of the katana's soul. A katana does not only cut. It also shows. Conscience, hesitation, mercy, ambition, all leave a mark on the blade's bright boundaries. Many warriors who carry a katana only think of being attacked. But the true samurai seeks a solution before drawing his sword. Because he knows that the greatest power of the sword is not to break, but to deter. For him, the katana can bring forth both peace and war. But this power requires mastery. To be able to suppress one's own anger, to be able to wield it at the right time, even to be able to turn back without fighting. These are the virtues of those who can truly carry the katana. An old samurai says, "Keep not your katana, but your heart sharp." Because the enemies end, but the storm within does not. Speaking with that storm is only possible when gathered at night. A samurai places his katana in front of him. He places his hands on his knees. He takes a deep breath and looks at the katana. As if it were a friend, a confidant. Because this steel he has carried for years is no longer an object, but a spirit. To respect it is actually to respect his own past, his decisions, his mistakes, his victories. Some samurai do not form a bond with the katana. For them, the katana is just a weapon. But the true ones understand that the katana looks like an eye, hears like an ear, beats like a heart. Cleaning the sword is not just a physical ritual, it also liberates the soul. With every wipe of dust, another fragment is released within. Because the katana does not forget its past. It reminds its bearer of its past. Silently, gently. On the battlefield, the katana shines, but its fragments come not only from the sun, but from darkness. With one stroke, the enemy is laid low. But at that moment, another part of the samurai is formed. Everything has a price. Every cut is a burden. That is why samurai do not speak much. Because they are too deep to be expressed with words. Their language is the sword. Their expressions are in their stance, their feelings are in silence. And therefore, the katana is a language that is not spoken but always understood. Masters give young samurai their first lesson by showing the katana to the heart, not the other way around. First, know yourself, they say. Otherwise, the katana will direct you. Therefore, carrying a katana is not just about carrying it. The bearer is also bound to the katana. There is a mutual surrender. And if this balance is disrupted, either the samurai falls or the katana falls silent. One day, the samurai grows old. He carries the katana not to fight, but to remember. The rust marks on it are the traces of a war he lived, a regret. But he still polishes it. Because the katana carries not the shadow of his past, but the appearance of his honor. At night, his eyes fill as he looks at it. Because he knows that with this sword, he has redeemed not only his enemies but also himself. And one night, while recording the state of his katana, he places his hand on it, closes his eyes, and whispers. You were not in my hand, you were in my chapters. A katana sleeps in its state, and a samurai works without war for the first time. Loyalty or conscience? For a samurai, an order is indisputable. With a single word from his daimyo, the sword is drawn, with a single sign, it is given. Loyalty is the samurai's backbone. The power that straightens him, keeps him upright, gives him direction. But what if the given order conflicts with the voice of his heart, if loyalty and conscience stand on two opposite cliffs? Then the greatest battle for a samurai begins. And this battle is fought not with the sword, but with the heart. That night, the castle was silent. The sky was gray, the wind dry, and the news it carried was heavy. A young samurai sat on his knees. His daimyo stood before him. The man he had served for years, trembled before with a single glance, bowed to since his childhood. This time, his eyes held not pride, but weight, and his voice was duller than ever. Your duty is to kill him, he said. Him, the samurai's closest friend, the warrior he loved like a brother, with whom he had sworn blood oaths, fought alongside, stood watch shoulder to shoulder through the nights. The reason was clear. Suspicion of betrayal. Perhaps it wasn't true, perhaps it was. But an order had been given. And now the young samurai bowed his head without moving his hands from his knees. Though his lips did not move, a single sentence revolved in his mind: loyalty or conscience? Loyalty was the first lesson taught. Do not question, execute. This motto had been internalized for a long time. Conscience, however, was a voice that came later. Silent but persistent. That night, he withdrew. He placed his katana in front of him. He placed his hand on it. He closed his eyes. He breathed. Was thinking that a weakness had emerged for a samurai like him? Or was true courage not to stop thinking? As he struggled with his inner voice, the past came to life. The moments they had laughed together, the battles they had fought to survive together. He questioned whether his brother had truly committed betrayal. But he was sure of one thing. He had never seen fear in his eyes, but he had seen a soul fighting for justice. The next morning, the man stood opposite him, kneeling. The samurai brought his hand to his sword but did not draw it. The man looked into his eyes. If you are buying the order, do not hesitate, he said. But these words held not a challenge, but a surrender. At that moment, the samurai swallowed. Because this was a battle fought not against his enemy, but against his own loyalty. Finally, he drew his sword. Light reflected off the steel. Everyone fell silent. Eyes met, and in an instant, the samurai returned the sword to its scabbard. I have shown my loyalty, he said. But if I sacrifice my conscience for it, that loyalty becomes an empty shell. It did not echo off the walls, but a deep crack opened in the samurai's soul. That day, the daimyo turned his back on him. The castle had not accepted him. But as the samurai walked out that gate, he felt lighter for the first time. Because this time, he was a true samurai not because he had killed someone, but because he had won the war within with honor. Epilogue: The unending echo. Some stories are not considered fully over even when they end. Because they carry a spirit within them that time cannot erase, that words cannot fully describe. And samurai were not remembered only for fighting, only for living, or only for dying. They left marks. Deep, invisible marks, too heavy to bear. Today, we do not know most of their names. Neither their tombstones remain, nor are their words spoken. But they still live on in a life within us. When we hesitate in making a decision, when we swallow our anger, when we lower our eyes and fall silent with honor, at that very moment, a samurai's heart beats again with us. Because true samuraihood lies not in flashy armor, but in a silent stance. The swords may have fallen silent, but that noise became an echo, and this echo still beats in the intervals. A true warrior leaves his deepest mark not with his sword, but by leaving without returning, by being silent, patient, forgiving, without going to his friends. A samurai does not live to be understood, and often departs misunderstood. But one day, when a child yearns for justice, when a young person chooses silence, when a man turns his back on dishonorable gain, then another samurai is reborn. Samuraihood is not a title left in the past. It is a spirit that grows even within us today. This spirit always carries a sword, but it always carries a balance. The lanterns go out, the night bites. But the fragments of light guide the way to morning. Perhaps you no longer hold a katana. Perhaps you are not guarding a castle gate. But you know what you carry now. The name of that burden is honor, patience, responsibility. Being a samurai is not about being seen, it is about knowing how to be unseen. Choosing what is right where no one sees, being able to remain true to yourself when no one is watching, not when you are on stage. Perhaps you cannot win the wars, but you do not lose yourself. And that is precisely why these stories are written not only for the past, but also for tomorrow. If, throughout these journeys, the meaning carried by that sword has remained with you more than the sound of the katana, then we have fulfilled our duty. Until we meet again in the story of another people, on another continent, on the next night. You can close your screen now. Because now, even when you stay, you can think like a samurai. And sometimes, the loudest sound is the silence left behind by saying nothing at all.